Yes, so here we are with our first COVID webinar. We were posting around 11 COVID articles in the past 1 month, just to a selected Bachu Rain community. Some of you are familiar, might be familiar with us. Some of you might be new to us, but here I am. I'm Bhaskar Sundaram. I run Bachu Rain, which is a market development specialist for predominantly facilities management sector. The reason for this webinar, let me bring it to a big screen, is this incident. So thank you thank you to all these frontline individuals. I'm sure many of your loved ones are safe and healthy. I have a personal experience. This triggered end of March. I visited a local hospital here where I live, and one of my friends was a head nurse, and she gave me this PPE kit, and she was wearing that for 12 hours in a duty, being a head nurse of a leading hospital. I couldn't wear that for 30 minutes. So what's happening out there, we might not experience it, but at least we are clapping our hands, we are saying thank you. But I did experience for 30 minutes, it completely changed the whole perspective of what they are going through what I see. So that's the main reason why we are here doing this, and we're unlocking our data points. So as we stand, the world has changed overnight, and predominantly some call it normal, some call it abnormal. Here we are, this is what we are doing. So what we did was we reached out to some of our very close friends in the industry, and did something called Unprepared. Unprepared is, yes, with all the business continuity plan that any company have done it, what we faced is something that 100% touching the heart, nobody was prepared for this. So we thought, I wasn't prepared for this, neither was pretty much all the providers, if you talk to them, and the buyers, and any business, and any individual personally as well. So whether we are going to a U-shaped recession or a V-shaped recession, as they call it, hopefully it's a V-shaped, we are in it at the moment. And in this 3-4 weeks, or pretty much 2 months, 90% of the white collar people are working from home. And that's interesting. And you will see lots, if you're used to our webinar in the past, it will be 100% data driven, but this time we want to keep it raw, and we want to keep it qualitative, straight from the heart, or straight from the mouth of the people whom we spoke to, because that's real. And so that's the information that we are sharing here. So like us, the public sector and the private sector are adjusting to this new normal, and we thought we will share this qualitative results in our own words. If you want the quantitative data about the market, it's there available in our page. We have 3 webinars that we ran last year, early this year, around how the FM market is looking. Yes, the opportunities that's been outsourced, our record shows 11,000 opportunities that's been outsourced in the UK by sector, public and private. Those opportunities in some form will be hitting the market, or will be insourced in the worst case, or will be coming out in a very different form. Either way, they are there in the market. So if you want to understand the market, suggest listening to some of our webinars, and also download the report. It's free. So I'll give you a disclaimer, which I already suggested. This is qualitative, very different from what we used to do before. And again, we won't be talking about the COVID impact on health, or a social, or high-level macroeconomic. Those things you can find it online. It's available in the public domain. Again, you won't be dwelling deep on the community spirit of everybody coming together, doing what they're doing, how work from home is working, not working, the ethos behind it, etc. We won't be touching that as well. And you all know the Nightingale construction, how our construction stroke FM providers stepped in the shortest time to do what they did. We won't be touching that as well. What we will be touching is, in addition to that experience that I had with the head nurse of mine in a hospital, plus our Unprepared initiative, plus what we find on the data, which is, most of you might have the OJU tracker in the service provider, because some companies have 5. Either way, 1 or 5, you would have seen the number of opportunities actually started to slow down. I'm talking about the volume. Sector by sector is different. This is public sector, which was expected to go high this year. That was what we forecasted in February. Suddenly, March, things start to go down. And if it's a very simple example, we don't use any tracker. We go to the source point, which is the TED database or the contracts finder, and we lift from there, and we notice interesting stuff happening. And again, while speaking with people, what happened was, the projects that was just on discussions to the projects that was actually ongoing are the only one that's coming and hitting the market, and they are actually hitting the market. There's no delays. But the project that was on the planning stages, most of it are canned. So we'll just this sort of a prediction of the providers whose general focus that comes from the public sector will fare more than the private sector. That's what we did in February, and that is still valid. With COVID, as you know, is a massive thing. If you are wondering who's this guy and what's this company do, this is it. I'm Bhaskar. I founded Bachu in 2014, actually. And gradually over the years, from one project to the other, we become a trusted market specialist for most of the well-known FM providers. And without getting into details, what we do, we strategize the market, we build up their sales and marketing strategy around the market, then we build the pipeline, then we build the bid strategy, and then we also take them to the go-to-market and manage the accounts, bits and pieces. Very small, referral-based, known to selected people, but the selected people tend to use us frequently. That's who we are. And over the years, with these relationships, we gradually built much more interesting insight, and we created our own niche that today we are the only UK provider to hold a massive database of all the outsourced opportunities in UK, and we share the insights regularly to the people. From that point, we did Precode, with, if you look into what we did in February, March, this is what we told the market. Here we go, guys. UK is still the highest penetrated market. UK is still the largest FM market in Europe, and the value ranges between 90 billion, 81 billion to all the way to 100 billion, depending on the international portfolio, whether you include that in UK or not. But either way, the market is matured, as we all know. By far, the most international competitions happen in UK. And as I mentioned, it has one of the lowest growth rate in Europe, because we have some projects that are in 4th generation. So this is what we already know, right? I added in, then we know Brexit, and we were working towards the Brexit timetable in February. And end of December, we'll come out of Brexit. But this COVID thing flipped the market. Did it flip the market? Did not flip the market? We are just 1 month into COVID. But as I said, there are some interesting insights that we started to see. But this is beyond the market. This is how personal relationships, what we are doing inside to make this market work. So I'm not going to list everything. You might read this. The slides will be shared. So let's move on. What we see here is, from our market analysis, this is what we know. Okay, the market is roughly 85 billion, out of which private sector and public sector kind of split in this ratio. So what we also did was, on the subsector, this is how the market kind of subdivided. There is a webinar called FM Market Breakdown. You will have the massive detailed breakdown by service, by sector on this. And this is what's already been outsourced. As you know, 90% of UK's, I would go even 90%. Anything that is not built, 90% of the market in UK is outsourced, especially on the facility side. If you look, and this is how they've kind of structured themselves. Again, the terminology might be slightly different in how you see through, but this is what we see. Predominantly office and commercial buildings are massive, and that covers 1/4 of the market, followed by manufacturing, industrial, whereas in the public, it's central government and local government. It's interestingly, in the central government, as you know, with all the crisis that's happening, defense and other elements, we have kind of put it separate here. But central government is continuing to push through, and there are lots of direct award contracts that's coming through, especially on NHS and the other domain. Whereas commercial buildings, which was the largest building, completely kind of started to slow down. Because as you know, the work from home crisis had started to spin a positive story, or okay, we need deep cleaning just to be prepared. But then when everybody started to work from home, the buildings were empty, and there wasn't much. I don't think many providers were built for that sort of agility to operate in 10% of the service portfolio, or 5% or 2%. You know what? But that's kind of suddenly shocked the market. But what we see here is, yes, the private sector and public sector will continue to play its own part. But whether it will play the part in the same way as we projected will be slightly different, especially the buyers are taking a massive hit, especially on the manufacturing side, which will touch the financial services side, or the commercial offices side, which will touch as well. Certain sectors are buoyant, demand has increased because they weren't hit much. But if you imagine the retail sector, what's happening there, you know, it's whether the whole product is going to come out on the same way, I don't think it will. But either way, those projects are already been outsourced, and it's still there waiting for it to be renewed, or waiting for it to be coming out as a new contract. So growth is going to be slightly harder to find in those sector, and it will be 100% driven by the new value propositions, advanced tech solutions, and the productivity gain will be a question mark, but it will be more or less around digital transformation. Whereas public sector, that's where things started to go. Local government, universities, I know those are the two will continue to insource for various reasons, as you know, emotional, mainly trust deficit. Whereas in the hospital side, which you started to do now with the COVID-19, that's where interesting thing happened. Whether they will continue, or one or two providers who started to insource, like recently NHS Property did insource from IT, whether they'll continue to do that, or our service providers have shared human stories enough in the marketplace so that the insourcing on the public sector started to be curtailed. That will be an interesting thing that's going to come and hit us in the next 3 months or so. Are we doing enough? I have the question there. So the central government again is trying to do as it can with the Brexit, with the massive treasury impact that they're doing. They're also trying to align the NHS spend with the overall CCS marketplace, and FTIS, as you know, on the defense side is still happening. So the way that we don't need to get into nitty-gritty details of the tender, but either way, central government continue to be the massive market, and people who pulled out of the public sector over the past 2-3 years because it's commoditized market might need to consider coming back, and people who decided to stick on and still take the brunt of the commoditized market might be like, okay, you have something, mainly because of the payment terms and other things, mainly because of the resilience that you can get out of it. So, you know, before we get into the actual the qualitative information, let's also cover this. If you are wondering what's the status of the outsourcing playbook, on the what to call a 2.0 version will be coming out in the next 2 weeks, definitely early May to mid-May. And then you have the outsourcing 3.0 that's already been planned to cover the post-COVID principles that might come and hit us before the end of the year. So the Brexit reform paper, again, the principles of what Brexit is going to, the procurement principles is going to look like. You know, we need to go for the WTO slightly thinner. We'll go for a different type of definitions. It all has been happening, and it's still ongoing, and it's still on track to hit us around beginning of June, followed by white paper in October and legislate in December. So they are still on track of kind of coming out end of December. That's what we are hearing. And as you know, is Brexit an issue now? I don't know, but we will see what we need to do. So what I thought is, I just thought I'll do a very soft poll on this, because I know you are from different backgrounds, but I thought I'll do a soft poll to just check the kind of the information of where we are. And I'll launch the poll. It's very simple. So if you can see the poll, let me know. Can you see the poll? Yeah, and if you can see the poll, just put your thoughts on what you can see. To what extent have you seen service disruption? The poll is anonymized, so I would not know who's sharing what information. And don't worry, it'll be good to know from the attendees what you see. To what extent have you seen service disruption? Can you see the poll? If you can start to vote, that'll be great. Thank you. see the poll. Please do. It's anonymized, so I just want to get a feel for the poll. Looks like some of you could not see. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Simon, try again, Simon, if you can. Right. We got 75% now. I think we are a very small group today, so please, if you can give a feel for it, that'd be great. Okay. So where we are in the poll is, okay, let me give another 15 seconds so that we at least have 2 minutes for the poll. Okay, I'll end the poll and I will share the results. I hope you can see the results. So what you're saying here is, when we did this, when we did the service disruption, we asked the question, we didn't do a proper quantitative survey. Yes, most of them picked up 4 and 5, starting to see the beginnings of real problems. And yes, and they are causing real problems, and some are, in between. I think some minor disruption, but nothing that has become critical. So lucky few has said none yet, but really worried about what's likely to happen. And fingers crossed, I pray to God that it will continue to be the same for you guys. So, and for the guys, yes, it started to show some real problems because people started to react straight away into what they know. And different companies react a different way, and different buyers start to react different ways. So you might have had different experiences. Once they start to consolidate their cost, reduce their budgets, how they treat their supply chain, either the providers or the buyers kind of hit the market where we are. And the other side, what will you do differently after the crisis is abated? I didn't want to go into bigger things because people have already, especially on the buyer side, on the commercial and the buildings, funnily enough, talent training was 75% on them because they realized, because they all have dispersed running billions worth of financial stuff online, the way they structure their shared services completely didn't work. So for them, the talent training was poor. So they have structured a business continuity plan, which we touched on 3 levels. Either way, yes, more work from home options will continue, more automation that will be expected, more business continuity planning, yes, 100%, because the recession to recovery to growth might take how many years? I don't know. I'm not an economist, but let's assume 1 to 3 years. So having a continuity plan, 100%, testing it out in a robust scheme, something there. And finally, focus only on target markets. 100%, this is very interesting stuff started to happen in the market. So thank you for that. Did you face any canceled orders, partial termination and contracts? I'm glad half said no and half said yes. I haven't looked at who you are, but you know what? It's happening, right? That's the important thing. It's happening. Terminations and canceled orders is happening in the market. We can't close our eyes now. It's happening. So that's it. So thank you. And now let's go move into the poll. So can you see my screen again, service provider? Sometimes after the poll, it doesn't work. If you can press 1 again, if you can see the screen, that would be great, please. At least 1 person, if you can do that, we can just go from there. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So what happened was, part of the thing, this is the first time, I don't know what you feel about it, but this is the first time I was able to directly engage with as many CEOs and as many senior stakeholders in a very long time. Because this kind of isolation meant that they are available and they are open to talk more openly than what they used to, both on the buyer side and the service provider side. So if you haven't done it, please do. People are available. So please do reach out and set up. So primarily what's happening here is on the positive side, what majority of the providers were planning to do, transformation, operational transformation, service transformation, digital transformation, it all got tested in this 4 weeks. Believe it or not, every single company transformed or were ready, were agile, responsive in whatever way possible. Yes, it's not be perfect, but on a very positive side, they were agile, they were responsive. And on the other side, managing furlough, it's a massive hit when government came with the signals of, hey, we are going to shut down the country pretty much. Furloughing the staff with very less information, managed it. Then they kind of managed to, split the teams into what are the critical contracts, what are the non-critical contracts, resource allocation after furloughing. That comes with this challenge, and they did it. On the other side, what are the other operational cost reduction that they could go for? Every single service provider have got some form of salary reduction agreed with their team, all the way from the board, from the CEO to the person managerial, all the way in the front, except the front line, where it's so heartwarming to see many service providers started to award the low paid frontline workers bonus, and they increase the salaries regardless whether the buyers pay them or not, right? So that's the first time the overworking, undervalued workforce suddenly started to be valued by their own business. And you would see the amount of thank you notes that's coming up suddenly hitting, and you might be wondering where we weren't thanked in the past, but today it's happening. So on the other side, the commercial teams, they are, if there is one team that was not being furloughed off in as many companies, is the commercial team, because they are pretty busy with the variation of the contracts. As some of you told on the on the poll, the termination of the contracts meant they were busy fighting it with them to just say, hey, you know what, on what basis are you terminating? Force majeure is not the right way. And on the other side, some are busy actually reaching out to their buyers and say, hey, you know what, our contract is coming for renewal. We want to help you with it. Why can't we extend it? We'll be part of the journey. And some were fighting on the other side, whether to keep the contract. Some were proactively doing the other one. It was always a mixed bag. Then 100% the focus went into COVID thing, but there were so many other sectors which was actually not impacted, or they are not critical frontline services, but they were completely overlooked. They were completely overlooked. And the priority was not given to, or priority was not given. Yes, that's the right word. And funnily enough, those contracts were payment-based contracts, where the customers started to hit them hard. So because these sectors were not being hit by COVID, or were hit by COVID, but imagine they're also looking for their own cost reduction. So we are going to see some of the qualitative stuff in the buyer side, but this is what's happening here. And some NHS, some providers who specialize on the NHS market, they manage to sort out the supply chain in addition to that. And that's a massive thing in its own. Especially some of the providers who support the private healthcare, they need to procure the PPE and the test kits themselves to serve their private healthcare clients. So, when the government is struggling to get the test kits themselves, many service providers quietly did it, quietly are doing it. But again, these are the brilliant stories that's been hidden. So, but yes, there's challenges with the supply chain, because everything is in a globalized world has been outsourced, but some of the stuff they try to make it infos, and things are happening locally as we speak, but still the challenge is on, but people are doing. One of the things that really shocked me was the treatment of the community. On one end, we sit and clap, and on the other end, and very odd cases, I have to say, some providers face that their cleanings, or the cleaners, or their frontline staff who have been working in hospitals or frontline environment were not being treated properly in their neighborhood. So they need to also help them on some of the reallocation and the other bits and pieces, which was odd. And to make it even more odd, there are some odd cases of engineers being assaulted because of the 5G myth. So home working comes with its own thing, mental illness comes with its own thing, but again, what we are not seeing is some of the hidden stories that comes out of the market. So the last line, which is not there, is I don't think any service provider was actually built to actually see their employees die. That's heartbreaking. I'm not going to say the numbers. I'm sure if you're a frontline service provider, you know who has lost in your own company, but this, nobody was prepared. This predominantly broke the everything else, what I talked about the foundation of every company. So the human cost was massive on these providers. So then moving on, we will go to, these are kind of the general comments that followed through. As I mentioned, these are straight raw, it comes out. So, the reliability, we can't forecast anything. We are on a month-on-month basis looking after our company. And the reality is, unless the government says when the isolation is going to end or when the exit strategy is going to come out, we don't know, but we are sticking on it. I already touched, many providers have many contracts, and every contract has its own thing. This is the time they're spending, commercial team is spending to understand, here we go, what are the contract variations, disputes and costs, how can we protect the assets, what are the opportunities that's coming out. What happens is some of the clients are actually switching off their suppliers, terminating, and they're reaching out to other suppliers and say, hey, you know what, will you be interested in taking over? Direct awards happening on a very small scale in the private sector, and it's happening in the public sector as well. So internal comms on furlough employees happening, workload tension. This is interesting that came out. When I say market, what you will feel, you will get this. Many employees were furloughed off, but then there were lots of employees who are working now even longer, but those are the employees that are going through pay cut as we speak. There is a side tension that's been there on the thing. And they are trying to mitigate this, but they can't help it. Some are working 12 to 14 hours. These people are not on the front line, but those people are having their corporate desk jobs. But now they're home because their colleagues are not there. They need to get through more. Saturday, Sunday, every day is the same, and they're just going through what they're doing. Then moving from there, they're moving on. There is a lot of requests on the technology. Can you have some technology to help us to do this? But the technology requirements are pretty vague from the buyers. It's very off. So if there's not much clarity, some are proactively going and giving them right technology, like test kits, like heat resolution, like energy mapping. How can we manage your building when there is nobody there, kind of a thing. Whereas others are saying, hey, can you come up with a proper question? We can help you with that. So Nightingale and others, let me accelerate from here. Yes, we saw people able to build the exhibition centers into hospitals within 1 to 3 weeks. And a lot of supply chain was restructured in the shortest possible time ever by the service providers. And most of the service providers, either in London, Manchester, or up north, they all have settled, and they are serving the issues on wage inflation backfilling, especially when people have been moved from the outside to frontline in the pre-existing contracts. Previously was a challenge. Supposedly it's now becoming less of a challenge. COVID-related absence have moved from 15% to 7% from what we spoke about. This is kind of some quantitative information from the 30 plus individuals or 30 plus companies that we spoke to. This is the most interesting thing. Collaboration, which we always want in industry, is happened, or it's happening and will continue to happen, because the suppliers, they're working together to help each other to serve their own community or the country. Social care, which is being left out. This is the odd part, where the budget comes from the NHS, where the service needs to be done by local government, and there is a big issue about how the whole thing is going to work, and they are trying to find a way out on this. So PPE testing, we're moving out on this. This is the core market as we speak now. NHS market, this is what's happening. And anything non-clinical stuff, all forgotten. So there is test centers that's coming up. There is a access to test as we speak, but there is still issues with the supply chain. But as I mentioned, the private health care providers, they are fully served by the service providers themselves. And that was very interesting. And we are seeing many service providers moving to, as we talked about, technology from moving to reactive to proactive, working on home testing, mobile testing to support their frontline colleagues to get testing access to as many people as possible. So, and that's where we are. So in the bidding side, this is where the three interesting things start to happen, where the tenders before COVID are still continuing. So people who have been reacting to tenders are reacting even more. As I mentioned there, it's like whatever the opportunity that comes up in the area that they operate, they are just bidding for it, because on the other side, they are seeing a slight slowdown. So anything and everything bidding for it. But they're furloughed off most of their staff as well. Some of the sales team has been furloughed off. In some cases, half of the team is furloughed off. So their workload is high again, more bids trying to keep up their revenue cycle. But you wouldn't believe, I'm sure as a service provider, some of you are doing this, but if you're not part of the service provider thing, and if you're listening to this, virtual mobilization, you might have not heard. How can you do virtual mobilization? It's happening. Some of the contracts has already been announced in end February, early March. End of March has been mobilized as we speak virtually, where the service provider and buyer work through calls. The clarification questions, presentation, live, final BAFO presentations happening through video conference as we speak. And the most interesting part is some of the site visits are done through drones, live telecast through video conference. Here we go. So, but on the other side, some have taken a very cautionary approach and say, you know what, our pipeline is bulldozed off completely. I don't see things are going to work out, especially on the retail and other sectors massively hit. Let's focus on what we have already got. Let's give the best shot to our customers, and let's not focus on new business. A different field, but these are all happening in there. Moving back to the buyers, in this recession, the biggest question is what will be my target operating model, and who can guide us through this new abnormal, and who's prepared for the future. These two words came from the buyers directly, and we spoke to financial services, we spoke to manufacturing, and we spoke to NHS, and we spoke to local councils. So informal chat, that's it. So these are the things that came up. Just like, we all are going through what we are going through, and we don't know actually what we want. We don't know what the world looks like, but we need to be prepared for the future. Who can guide us through this new abnormal? That's it. If you look at the buyers, and majority of the banking and the high-end clients used to have shared services in multiple locations, but some put everything in one country, say India, Philippines, etc. And some, they actually have manufacturing hubs in China and Vietnam, Bangladesh. They all have been hit when they put all the eggs in one basket. So they all are coming back and trying to rationalize and say, hey, you know what, not just property they operate, how about our whole shared services? And they came out with their own business continuity plan of, when one country switch off, we move to other country. When one center switch off, we move to other center. So the problems are pretty big over there, and they mitigated it. So the BPO ITO company stepped on and they mitigated it for their own buyers. And what that meant is, so when the focus was there, the buildings were empty. Now they're starting to look what they can do more. So shared services, as I mentioned, didn't cope well, but at the moment it's coming out. So retail and hospitality, there was a huge existential crisis in the market. But good news is some of the retail providers switched successfully online, and one is not Amazon. One successfully switched online, and they even made a £20 million turnover in 1 month. So hospitality, it's just, again, it's the same. So who's actually doing the restaurants, who's actually doing the catering in high-end buildings? Yes, that's all shut down, but some are actually coming out and doing online stuff. Some are just like, what can we do, what we can't do. So moving on from there, the general thing is, whatever happened from the buyer side will continue to happen, but any new shaping in the market that they are projecting, that they are going to shape, that they were planned to shape, that they're not going to shape it. So you would expect some sort of slowdown that will be coming and hitting the market all the way starting from July to all the way to December, because people are trying to fix more and more of the operations. So more renewals, some terminations, and let's see through very differently 2021 onwards. So some are looking for help on the commercial side. These are exact words. Interestingly, NHS procurement is still not being used in the fast track way, NHS England. So CCS marketplace, it's been put forward by the central government, helping with the NHS procurement to just see how quickly they could mobilize what they want to do, not just PPE and test kits, but also on the other sides. So two things highlighted. What I did ask the question about service disruption. What actually happened part of the COVID-19 disruption? Two things was highlighted. These are the two things. The quality of communications went down between the service provider and the buyer based on whom we sampled qualitatively. So they thought, this is the time where we want you, but you were not there. Again, not in the same way, but mostly halfway through. Response time, again, when people try to reallocate resources from non-critical to critical services, some people felt that they are not being looked after, so response time and other things felt. But everybody know what's happening, but they are on it in the journey. But let's rattle through quickly. So if you look at oil and gas, obviously oil, gas, retail, commercial, building, manufacturing, hospitality, we know it's impacted. So if you listen to our previous webinar, you would know that they are big together. They at least control 75% of the market, but they have been impacted. What's there left in private sector? So telco, utilities, housing, pharma, central government, NHS, healthcare, increased demand, or at least things are happening. Schools and universities in the middle. Whether the market moves there, market isn't moved, students staying in the student houses, in the schools, teachers are not willing to come to schools unless it's fully there. They don't want the schools to open. What will be the impact there when the schools open and somebody hits it there, and how the FM providers are going to do their question mark. But these are the kind of 4 or 5 different types of customers. I just tagged them just before the webinar. So some have reaffirmed the relationship. Let's go beyond COVID and let's do this properly. For now, let's renew. Some have said, you know what, we have given you so many chances. You know this is not working for you and us. Let's terminate. Amicable relationship, terminated, done. Some are like, you know what, we want to get out of this. I know whether you do good work or not good, we just want to get out of it. Force majeure, boom. Not no, then come out with the data and then said, here we go, these are the grounds for termination. Take it, lose it. And some, I'm not going to terminate you, but I'm going to cut the scope to the bare minimum. So 80% is what I want you to run it. Take it or lose it. So some have got terminated, and some have been terminated at least once, some have 3, some have renewed 3 of their contracts. So it's all mixed bag. Again, people react to things differently at different spaces, but what we're trying to see is that 1 month of reaction is starting to calm down a bit, and people are starting to make some rational decisions as we speak. So what else? The investors. This is always the interesting thing. Post-Brexit, we had 200 plus calls with so-called analysts and investors who specialize in outsourcing industry. Where we started to receive few calls again. Investors will be investors. So when the market goes down, they will try to make money, and it is what they are made for. And some investors are actually made multi-millions out of this whole thing. But if the important thing is, some will be shot, some will not be shot, but it depends on who's looking at it. The hedge funds and the investment funds, they both are trying to see the market very differently as we speak. So the hedge funds look for opportunities like what happened with Kier, with Interserve, with Capita last year, whereas the investment funds will take a long-term approach. But now the funds are not there, as you can see, the equity funds. It's all debt funds that's available, so that will come out in the zone market. So we'll just, we don't need to dwell deep on that. But for now, there is still a lot of interest, and mergers and acquisition, consolidation, 100% will accelerate for the right companies. So what we see going forward, where we are at the moment is, this is where we are. There is a shock to the economy, that's what we're phasing through, and we are going through what we call a reaction to the shock. The reaction to the shock is happening as we speak. Then there will be happening to the reaction to the reaction. What the government decided to give this treasury 350 billion, and what the companies have decided to move their critical contract to the non-critical contract, a furlough of staff, increase in tax, they all will be coming and hitting. The decisions that we make today, in this month, this quarter, will come and get back to us very shortly. And how we react to the reaction will again have a massive impact on the whole market. It's going to be structured. So we're already starting to see many companies are using values in many of their social media posts or taking to the market, which was really moving for me personally, because this is where you try to dig deep. It's no more about efficiency, no more about what they stand for. And some have 100% demonstrated what they stand for. Some understandably are very tight with cash, and they are doing their best in doing what they can. What that meant is, opportunity-wise, as you said, many will be starting to focus on core markets. So many will be trying to pull off from their marginal markets, which mean the leftover that will be done by this providers who decided that they want to go for the core markets and leaving behind will become a market in itself. What the meant is mid-tier players who are ready to restart and recreate quickly might be in a best position to take over some of the larger contracts or some of the contracts that big strategic suppliers are leaving behind part of the overall focus areas. So, so that's it. But the important thing is the relationship will be even more strong, as we can see from the buyer reaction. The new opportunities in the market will be more or less reliant on the resilience of the companies and the relationships, which we can't bet. We know 11,000 opportunities are there, and either way that goes from one provider to the other provider, it will always be coming on the market. If it's not coming on the market, even if we assume 1,000 of that will be in-sourced next year, still there are 10,000, right? And the 10,000 will be coming out in some form or the other in the next 3 to 5 years. And that's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets interesting on the resilience of the companies and the resilience of the relationship. So what that meant is smaller FM companies, smaller tech companies might fill the gaps, what's being left behind by the bigger companies, and we just need to wait and see what that actually looks like. So final thoughts before we open up for questions, if you do have any. We are continuing to see the growing polarization between winners and losers in this market, mainly because of scale and the core market, what they're operating. It's whether can you grow 10% in the new market, I think is possible, because as it happens, with fear comes opportunities, but many companies are moving out of this. Many companies now clearly know what they are good at, what they are not good at, and they are reacting quickly. But for some providers who are still twitching their arms to just say, we'll wait for it, we'll wait for the announcement for Brexit exit date, we'll wait for the announcement of the future stuff. And it's not going to be good, because the market changed, as you know, very quickly in 3 to 4 weeks, and it will be very, very quick for this year as well. So you might be left behind. But for others, it is what it is. So the dynamics will continue to be impacted by the customer, by the company, by the competitors. But most importantly, as we try to see, community will be a massive influence. Whether we, this is what we always wanted. We are the unsung heroes, and the outsourced industry, the outsourced service providers have been left behind. There's trust deficit today. People recognize it, but are we leveraging that enough to build that trust in the community so that we can do bigger and better things? We were part of the journey with them. Looking back 1 year down the line, it's a question mark, but these are early stages, but we'll just see how companies react to that. And that's what builds the market around it. So the reactions with reactions. As you know, this is a quote that was actually given by one of the CEO, not an investor, it's a CEO. So you can see some positive things. People are looking, it's an opportunity to things that they haven't done before. So if Lucky, that company, and any other company that comes out with, they will try to do things differently. Yes, facilities as a sector has moved very far from being a hard FM, soft FM, provider into workplace optimization and other thing. It's much wide. So you would have noted some associations were banging on work from home, workplace optimization far too long. Some were talking about awards. Some were talking about mental illness, whereas on the nitty-gritty, even the FM suppliers were facing much more. One association was brilliant in how they approached it, and they even set up their own Yama group. And yeah, I was so happy to just see the interactions happening there, because collective collaboration happens in real time. So that's the thing. The positive thing here is we are accelerating to a digital first environment, whether we like it or not. As you mentioned, the work from home will start to increase. So how are we going to deliver this on a real-time agile pay-as-you-go model? That's the question mark. So the change happens in real time, and the strong will continue to get stronger, and we'll continue to. It's true, we have to prepare for recession. In our small case, the way we have reacted is, yes, we talked to people about what they wanted, but we also asked a few other things as well. This is not the first time that we have done here. So I'm sure most of you will be coming out of it. But in addition to pushing forward for a transformation cost savings plan, there are some new learnings that you came out with, both from employees who are working from home, both from the frontline people who are there, and both from the furloughed staff who are there, and from the guys who are working 12 to 14 hours to keep the company running, and the company is going through this massive thing. There is so much to learn. And the important thing is how these lessons are going to be documented collectively. The journey of a CEO who's trying to keep the company, the journey of a frontline provider who's actually giving up his life for the company. How often or how rare or when does it ever happen? So all these things meant like it's going to come and hit us. So at this stage, it's impossible to just say where the market is, but what we have done is what I'll share at the moment. So the digital projects, there are lots of requirements for tech, people to use the word tech, but they don't know exactly what they want. But anything that's lower operating cost, digital projects continue to attract investment from the buyers, from what we spoke to. But anything that requires capital investment may not be so popular. Part of the operational thing, can you do some value add on? There'll be lots of things that you can do for. So I just want to share this before I close and see what other things that we are doing here. My question here is, are we doing enough for these people in the front line, other than thank you in social media, other than clapping the hands like what we do others, because these people are what we are doing. So we have a sector have gone far, so far now, and this is what we always crave for, the outsourced industry. Give us the respect that we deserve. We run critical frontline services. Today, we have been given that opportunity. This is the parting comment from me. Are we doing enough for the sacrifices these people are doing? Are we doing enough for these guys who work 12 to 14 hours just to keep the company going? Are we doing enough for the CEOs who are doing this? I don't know. But end of the day, a person who wear this for an hour in a hospital who couldn't bear this, but a person who's doing this to keep the environment going for 12 hours to save lives, I think these guys deserve more. So, but my question is, are we doing enough? So I just want to leave that point and do some little bits that we are doing. We very quickly need to restructure. On a learning hub, we gave access to furloughed staff. Close to 200 furloughed staff at the moment are in a self-care program. At the same, we structured this in 18 days, and sales, marketing, account management, any corporate officer staff, including HR, who all been furloughed off. We have taken this 200 people, plus we unlocked our courses. What it meant is they are part of something, they are part of the market. We keep them. We have now been going to support the UK government, the procurement project management on a pro-gov basis. And as an NHS volunteer, we are also part of this. This is our little part. I know we are a small business, but we are doing our say. In addition to that, as the company which has built this database over the years, we are opening up our vault. So in the next 1 month, I know when we decide to open up the market before end of May, we are planning to do 11 webinars going market by market, unlocking the opportunities sector by sector. It's all free. It's something simple that we can do to help the providers who are all finding new ways of doing. Look into events and we'll just do that. And for some companies who require pipeline support and stuff, we are also going to help there. So either way, my comments is this, what I learned is I'm here working from home. I need to tell my kids to keep me going for an hour without disturbing me. Either way, there are things that we can control. There are things we can't control. And I'm just here. And there are one of my very close friend, his mom passed away in Italy. And he wasn't able to leave the country because he was working in frontline as a doctor in UK. And his mom has already passed away in the freezer in Italy. That's where she's been kept. So things are very different to what we're doing. So if you can do positive things, let's do the positive things. But this is the time where we all do what we are supposed to do. I just end there and I'll just open for questions. Any questions?